Hello and welcome to this another episode of conversations that I have with banking leaders, risk managers, compliance experts. And today I have with me a person with an illustrious career behind him and also been the flag bearer in this universe of risk management for years, Jaidev Iyer. I presume he could be called the father of a lot of the operational risk techniques that have become front and center and pretty much part of the core processes in banks, but I'll let him speak to it. So welcome, Jaidev. Thank you for joining me. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell your own story in your own words before we start talking about your work, and the universe that you have impacted.
Thanks so much, Shashank, and hi. Obviously, a very long career, as the newly sort of minted beard might show. It's a pleasure to be on Risk Rebooted. I spent the majority of my career in global banking and financial services. I think if I take it back the full approximately 40 years or so, a third of it has been as a trader on the front line, foreign exchange in Hong Kong and derivatives out of Singapore and treasury out of the Middle East. The other third has really been in turning around and doing the dirty by my trading colleagues by being a risk manager, head of market risk in Asia, then the US, global head of risk for asset management, global head of operational risk at Citi, in a later life, global head of operational risk at UBS. So the natural sort of logical third in conclusion has been really advisory or consulting, do unto others. And I have done a range of things here, helping build enterprise risk management frameworks for the banks I work for the clients I advise, orchestrating operational risk programs in multiple places, advising organizations on aligning risk compliance and emerging technology across multiple markets. I think the story of my life in some ways is a easy sort of mobility between front offices as a trader structurer to being a risk manager. And I think the empathy that comes from having traded or transacted yourself is something that's really valuable when you go into risk management and think everybody should always behave perfectly. Ditto, you go into risk management and you understand how not to perpetuate a bureaucracy. So that's one. And I think two is just being the fool that rushes in where lesser fools may not tread so easily. What I mean by that is most of my roles, in fact, in business, but also in risk, came about because I put up my hand at the first sign of a crisis. Not just the pleasure in gore and blood and all of that, but really just the idea that people who said things were difficult, complex, complicated, new environments. Recent sort of, I was doing a check, 9 out of 11 titles that I ever had were titles that nobody had had before, which means I was really first in, first responder. And then guys looked at me and said, do you want to sit down and make that a job? And that list goes, but clearly I've enjoyed this idea of going in there and making some sense out of virgin sort of lands. And that's true on the business side and on the risk management side. And I'll pause after this for a second, just so you confirm that we are on the right track. But I've also, over a long period of time, philosophized a lot. That really sounds like an old man. But I have looked at issues, events, and I've been through so many, it's definitely worth a book or two. But I've looked at lessons learned and portability of those lessons also from the viewpoint of what does it tell you about what works or what doesn't work in different situations and why things go belly up when they do go belly up? And is it always going belly up first, or does the first responder come and really create a crisis out of what could have been a simple event? So let me stop there and you tell me what we should talk about further.
No, absolutely. There's lots to cover. And thank you for that brilliant sort of overview and introduction. Also, as for anybody who's listening in to this, realizes from what you just mentioned, there is a lot to cover. There's just a lot that you've experienced, lots that you've impacted, lots that you've learned. And, that's a good thing. We'll probably pick some nuggets from here and there throughout your career's learnings and experiences. So I want to start with maybe a couple of subtopics, and again, like I mentioned, lots to cover, but we'll kind of go one at a time to make sure we do justice to it. The one topic that you mentioned, which intrigued me, and I think it's exciting for almost everyone, is this perspective. And what I mean by that is you started by saying, hey, you were the sort of the trader, the person who was structuring deals. So you're basically driving business. And then you also changed hats and, you ended up becoming the person who was responsible for risk management, the leader driving that. Typically, from my own experiences in the past, and from all the stories that I've ever heard, there is a lot of conflict in the two roles.
Yes,
Because
yes.
at some level, the trader, the structurer, the business-focused person feels like compliance and risk and controls are kind of coming in my way of growth, coming in my way of driving the business forward. It's not like they're averse to it. It's not like they don't like it, but they certainly don't like the bureaucracy or the process or the additional burden it imposes. And then usually it's the flip story on the other side, where risk management feels like, oh, these guys have no regard for that odd situation or the black swan event that can kill us all, or forget the black swan, but even the lack of controls that could just put us on the wrong foot or just unnecessarily create liabilities, right? So there's that little bit of worldview difference. Having been on both those seats, and this is what I would want to dig a little deeper into, did you build a deeper appreciation than people on either side? Because you must have interacted with people on either side. And then did that give you some unfair advantage, as you sort of segued from being a trader to a, risk managing leader?
I agree with almost everything you said except for the word unfair. I mean, it was a very fair
Fair
advantage. And the
advantage.
only real, and I think this is why for a long period of time, I was a poster child. I was the one that people looked at to convey that A, risk management as a career is not the end of the world, and that you could actually have that easy mobility from front office sort of roles to risk at a time when people, as you said, risk was not glamorous. Risk was where bad traders went to die. I mean, so it was really, and over a period of time, I have not only tried to extract the philosophy. I think somewhere you mentioned once upon a time slogans. I'm full of slogans, right? The idea is not just to make that lesson sort of come out, but to make it palpable in a way that you are not just preaching, but you are in some ways epitomizing the sort of good risk management and the bad of bad risk management in a way that ex ante people can look at it and say I'll do something. But I sort of lived with 4 or 5 extracts of this. I used to always talk about the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday syndrome that
Okay.
exists in banks.
Tell me
And the
more about that.
Monday,
That's interesting.
easy. Let's make money on Monday.
Okay.
Let's worry about expenses on Tuesday. And by the way, get me a risk report on Wednesday. And I'm like, no, 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 no. It doesn't work that way. The whole idea of embedding risk. See, once upon a time predates you, but we just operated on revenues. KPIs were revenues. And then people suddenly learned to look at margins where they said expenses matter, and therefore let's do revenue minus expense. And then people like me came by and said, hold on, revenue minus expenses does not complete that expression. You need to also take out the cost of risk. And therefore, the idea that risk is something that you need to embed. Two, join the dots. You go back to every crisis in history. 2008-10 was, ideal for this. The number of people who truthfully, after the accident, said, "Hmm, or I told you so," is gargantuan. I was on the board of the Global Association of Risk Professionals, where we ran a series which said they told us so. And
Mm.
then it was really everybody who saw it coming but couldn't do anything to stop it, me included, by the way. There is a book where I'm almost a full chapter. It's called Chasing Goldman Sachs, written by a Wall Street Journal writer called Suzanne McGee. And she wrote about me admitting that while I thought I was the smartest guy in the room, and I definitely, absolutely told them so, I also say there, but that ain't enough. You, to be a good risk manager, need to be able to actually preempt or make those lessons such that people, years later, I go into a new role and people are doing 200-page reports, which nobody wants to read in very tiny font that nobody can see, right? And I say, no, 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 no. Give me a one. I became thereafter called the Mr. One Pager. I said, I want a one-page report and I want minimum 24 font, right? And I would like to restrict it to 4 bullet points. And they were like, not possible. I said, don't tell me the what, tell me the so what, right? I am not going to be impressed by all the wonderful things that you're crunching. Just give me, right, the implications of the effects. Give me the so what. And if you're putting this in front of somebody, tell him or her, hey, mister, you get paid at a higher grade than I do. Here are the possible decisions you can take. Take one. But this join the dots intelligence was something we seriously lacked. And by the way, when we do come to talk about AI and modern technology, the point is that we may finally have acquired that
Mhm.
join the dots intelligence, which once upon a time was a real problem for risk management. Three, I talk about the unusual, the unintended, and the unacceptable. What do I mean by that? You are a risk taker. You need to know what is unusual for you and your environment, because unusual probably means complex. It probably means riskier than what you have done before. And you need to have the ability or the wherewithal to bring a few adults around that table and say, I'm doing something unusual. This might represent the top 5% of riskiness to the unintended. I'm a trader in currencies, whatever. I am used to and I want to take risks, but other risks creep in. Documentation creeps in, or counterparty risk creeps in. That's not what I am equipped to do, and that's not what I want to do. So, how do I manage these unintended risks? And last but not the least, what is unacceptable? Where are the boundaries? It is absolutely important in a much later life in operational risk. I would go to potential client CEOs and I would ask them two questions. I would say to them, if you get a call from one of the people at 3 o'clock in the morning and he says hello and the phone gets cut off, but it's clearly there is a crisis, please tell me what the crisis is. He's like, but what did he say? I said, he called you at 3 o'clock in the morning. You get paid to tell me right now what the crisis is that he called for. You cannot tell me that you need to wait to hear from me what the actual crisis is, right? Number two, I say to them, random CEO, I said, what is your appetite for sexual harassment in your workplace? And they're like, what do you mean? Zero. I said, ridiculous. If you have a certain number of human beings in your organization,
Mhm.
there is a
Yeah.
certain amount of bad behavior. And if you want to bury your head in the sand and tell me I have no appetite for risk for sexual harassment or forgery or fraud or any number of other things, kidding yourself, right? So tell me what you're doing from the top down for that and from the bottom up for that.
Lot of
Lastly,
good points. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no,
Please
no, no.
complete this.
Last prayer. This is very important. If you attended one of my long lectures, this you will come to and you will stop there. I teach the Titanic as a case
Okay.
in multiple schools. It's been a
Interesting.
while now, but I have for a long period of time I taught the Titanic as a 1.5 day case. I won't bore you with all the details, but one of the things I say at the end of the Titanic is, irrespective of a religion that you profess or no religion at all, as a good risk manager, you must roll out of bed every morning. You must fall on your knees and you must pray to God or pray to whatever you pray to. What is that risk management prayer? It is, God, please send me an accident today. Not, don't send me
Interesting.
an accident.
Okay.
Please send me an accident. And sort of what she whisper, whisper, God, please don't make it too big. Please don't let it consume me. All of those things are nice. But why? In the absence of an accident, your business senior managers don't have context for the cost of risk management. Why is it worth it? Hey, Malaysian Airlines, an aeroplane disappears, I'm due to it. People haven't found it, but if I misplace my telephone somewhere, I know where to find it, correct? So there is a find
Absolutely.
my phone, but why is there not a find my plane? And the answer is simply that somebody somewhere ex ante decided that it was too expensive to install that control, but ex post, the one day after the accident, that cost becomes easy to justify. The Titanic sailed with a single steel hull, but post that crisis, every ship on the high seas goes with a minimum double steel hull. Did it suddenly become affordable? Yes, because you have now a data point, a context for what is the cost of the accident, and therefore, what is the affordable cost of risk management against that accident.
Brilliant. Brilliant. You made so many points, Jaidev, that I really want to kind of dig into. And I think that's what we'll try and attempt to do right now, because there are like 4, 5 things that you mentioned sort of embedded in your, postulation and illustration of how you should approach risk management, and I will probably kind of go one at a time, maybe go in the reverse order, since you spoke about the Titanic example, which is front and center, at least from this conversation between us. I think there are two important points, at least I'm taking away from that Titanic example. One is that contextualization, and also for the people in and around you, not just the risk manager, to understand what that risk implications could be, is equally, if not more important for us as a discipline, for us as a society to plan for it, to build those controls in place and take it seriously, right? So contextualization seems like a very big part of the puzzle. And so there I would ask you a sort of a second level question there, is that, we, in our enterprise scenarios at least, tend to model these out or simulate these out from time to time, right? And one example of that could be, say, the classic disaster recovery type of an exercise we indulge in, right? Or business continuity exercise that we indulge in, a business resilience lately that a lot of folks in the financial
Yes.
world are talking about.
Yes.
Is that sort of a simulated exercise a good way to build context, or do you think simulated exercise are too artificial, too sandboxed for people to relate to, or there is somewhat like something in the middle? At least we achieve something, and it's not as adverse as not having any exposure whatsoever to the possibilities.
On 9/11, I was on the 47th floor at Citigroup, which was the old Solomon Brothers building, downtown 7 World Trade Center. So among other things, we went down first. In 100% of my classes, and I teach a lot, I will go in and say to the audience, do not look up. Do not look up. Anybody now tell me the number of smoke detectors installed in the ceiling of this room?
Interesting. Okay.
And everybody will
Anybody
say,
able to answer? No.
don't know, huh? Do you have the answer? You do.
No,
You do?
no.
No. Okay.
Sometimes I do, but
Okay.
sometimes I'm careful about things. But I think 9 out of 10 times I'm going to fail a sudden question like this because I may just have not noticed. I'll be just too consumed with other things. But you're
Yeah,
right.
and I say this to people, saying not to make you blush, but one part of the right answer is, in fact, that I do not want to notice the smoke detectors unless one goes off.
Correct.
So that is one kind. I ask for two kinds of metrics. People talk about risk indicators and so on. And I talk about indicators of health or well-being. And I talk about smoke detectors as things which are discrete. I need 1,000 of them. We
Mm-hmm.
don't want to look at them all the time. And I don't want to report on their performance all the time, except A, when they go off, or B, when they don't go off when they should. Okay. So the business continuity, look at this. How many organizations, and I go around and tell them, give me the metric. Smoke alarm goes off. How many people do not vacate the building within 5 minutes? You'll be shocked, right? A lot of people are like, shut that damn thing off. And I'm like, no, 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 no. You're supposed to get up. You're supposed to go down the stairs, yada, yada, yada. Call trees, all that. Oh my God. So we've gone through any number of crises. The story of my life, because of this, I want to volunteer to be the first type of this risk manager. I've been through a hell of a lot of crises,
Right.
right? From including immediately after the first Gulf War, went to the Middle East to bring together all of our books there, all the way through to 9/11 and multiple other situations. But I always say that my one of my first bosses, Victor Menezes at Citibank, always used to describe good and bad luck this way. But luck is the intersection of preparedness with opportunity,
That's a good
right?
point. Yes,
Which
yes.
means that the opportunity for a bad event or a good event
Mm-hmm.
happens with reasonably equal probability to everybody in their lives.
Sure enough.
The difference between somebody who made it and somebody who crashed and burned is that one was prepared and the other was not prepared when that particular window either opened or closed. So, is there an excuse for? I used to get any number of senior business managers who would say, "Hey, Jaidev, that's one of those rare events, meteoroid crashing down or,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And you can't really spend the time and the money preparing for it." I say, okay, but tell me what would happen if that happened. No, there are scenarios where I can try and discuss with you how we should prepare for a very low probability, high impact event versus the other way around, right? I mean, there are reasonable ways to say we'll pause it for all of that. So I'm rambling a bit, but the point I'm making here is there is no excuse for not being prepared, whether it's a natural disaster or a pandemic or, a power going off or, whatever. There is an argument for saying that everything in life is probabilistic and that I have a simple, not necessarily mathematical, but a simple way to multiply severity by frequency or probability and come up to an impact, so long as I am still going to survive the morning after,
Right. Sure enough.
right? So long as I am willing to. So, people might laugh if I propose heat maps and risk matrix and things like that, the olden days, where I used to put flowcharts all over the wall to
Yeah.
show the sequence of good and bad things. But the tool you use is clearly very different today and good for us. That's the
Right.
case.
Right.
But the ability to understand. Now, risk management was never intended to be a compliance afterthought.
Right. Sure. Of course.
Risk,
Like a
risk
pre-planning.
manage,
Think of that first.
management was supposed to be a forward-looking exercise, right? And risk management was supposed to be contextual. Chuck Prince, my one of my bosses, who I loved for the fact that he was one of the best risk managers I knew. Right?
Mm-hmm.
He talked about shared responsibility because around that time, Chuck actually sent me to this program at John F. Kennedy School at Harvard, which was behavioral economics.
Right.
This was with Andrew Lowe long ago. I'm talking about almost 20 years ago, at the
Mm-hmm.
time when behavioral finance or behavioral economics just very, very new fads. But it completely changed my life about my thought process. It just destroyed my thinking in terms of capital markets because
Mm-hmm.
I empathized or related to the fact that fear, greed, ego
Mm-hmm.
are bigger drivers of risk management than one factor going wonky or one standard deviation becoming four standard deviation.
Right.
That the human being in that loop, right, did things or reacted to things in particular ways, especially reacted, i.e., I handle more, I think at least two of the three largest rope trading events in history have had me right there as a risk manager.
Interesting. Well, we'll talk
Right?
about that. I think that by
Yeah.
itself is a good, interesting topic. I want to kind of bring us back a little bit, and this is, by the way, phenomenal. I think all your perspective is very valuable. What I'm taking away, and this is a little bit of a conflict, I guess, that most people run into, and I'd love to get your viewpoint on this. Is when you start a risk management exercise, right, and whatever the context may be, and let's just, for the sake of being a little more specific, make it operational risk context, right, in an organization, right, just for example's sake, you made a point which I'm kind of sort of reinterpreting as saying it needs to be simple, it needs to be actionable. That's why your
Yes.
whole initial
Yes.
pitch around, don't give me the 200-page report, give me the one slide, make it
Yes.
24 font, like whatever, give me 4 bullet points. I guess finally you're kind of alluding to the fact, make it simple so you don't need to have a long process or a sort of a lot of preparedness to even make sense of it, right? Anybody reads it, gets it, right?
Correct.
And
Correct.
the second thing that you gave that example, which I do want to double click into a little bit, is about that 3 a.m. stories. Like, hey, you get a call at 3 a.m. and then you get no context. It's gone, right? Like the guy just
It's
calls
gone.
up and then drops. Now you've got to do something about it. I guess what you're alluding to there, if I'm understanding that correctly, is that you've had enough prior information and understanding of your context that at least you are able to get to some level of action basis what you
Absolutely.
already know without any new information, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's an interesting point, and I guess both of them, what you're really in some sense saying is like, hey, you should know what your top risk pieces are, you should know how to approach them, and it should be simple to understand. But then I'm wondering, and this is again more of a very earnest sort of a debate that's running in my head as I listen to this, is I think we have also gone the side as an industry of trying to do risk assessment or risk management around anything and everything. In fact, the universe has just been expanding. We try and calculate more things, build more models, collect more data, do more things, which is all good. But usually it never then restricts to 4 bullet points. Actually, there are like 45 bullet points. You know what I'm saying? And
Because
sometimes
we spend time on the what instead of the so what.
right, right. So, like, that's my point, right? And I think let's go to that. So, how do we move, whether culturally or is there some sort of a method to that madness where we can very simply help people understand and say, hey, move from, the what's and the what ifs to so what, right? Like, look at it from that standpoint. What's the good mental model there? What
Two
have
quick
you
stories.
seen?
Two quick stories. When I
Yes,
became
go
head
for
of
it.
operational risk at Citi, 2004, in fact, I worked with senior management at that time when we first settled the issues related to some of the big historical scandals that we had. Almost my first month on the job, I took a $10+ billion write off, and we recorded that as the first and largest ever operational loss we took. One of my bosses, the head of the corporate investment bank at Citi at that time, Bob Druskin, Bob said to me when I walked in there and somebody said he's going to be called head of operational risk. And Bob said to me, look, 6 levels below me, there are 58 people who spend all day filling big Excel sheets with small numbers. If you do nothing else, do one thing for me. Go there, figure out what they do, and come back and tell me. Take away not just that senior management doesn't know what these guys sitting there in the basement in rooms without windows are actually cooking up, but it's really, there is no information flowing up from this whole, let's do risk management sort of, eager beavers down there. Bigger story. Again, you let me know when to run out of time. Paul O'Neill.
Good.
Paul
Good.
O'Neill became chairman of Alcoa
Mm-hmm.
at a time when it was the 900th most respected firm in the S&P 1000. True.
Yeah, yeah.
I may be off by a couple of
Sure,
numbers.
sure. But yeah,
Lowest performing, employee morale was bad. Every alternate day, employees in the lunch break went to the car park and burnt effigies of everybody they could think of. Paul O'Neill takes over. I'll make it fast. Paul O'Neill, later US Treasury Secretary, yes?
yes.
Paul goes in there and essentially shuts himself up in his room for 2 whole weeks and does not come out. And people say, what are you doing, boss? And he's like, I'm going to find the one metric that I need to have in place to run this whole firm.
Mm-hmm.
Because in 12 months from now, we will be in the top 10 most respected firms. We'll have the least employee morale issues, and we will be in the top 25 returns on the S&P.
Okay.
Fast forward, achieved all of that. So emerges 2 months from then from his room and says, here is the metric. The entire firm will report to me on one metric, which is worker injuries in the firm equals 0.
Okay.
You may say, oh, okay, fine, nice. Osho would be happy, and all of those worker injuries. No, 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 no. Change the entire reporting dynamic. He said the chain. Every time there is one worker injury in some obscure plant somewhere, that entire chain has to come up reporting to me what happened, why did it happen, why will it never happen again, how much did it cost us in lost productivity, yada, yada, yada. And everybody is just rooted on that one. Obviously, on the softer side, employee morale, worker productivity, legal issues went away, customer complaints went away. You keep peeling the onion on that. There is a tremendous amount of, this is a Harvard case study, by the way, and I have done this as a case study as a student in that class. Mind boggling in terms of all of it. And so when I go to classes now, more often than not, I ask in a breakout session, my groups to basically come back to me with the one metric. And by the way,
Mm-hmm.
the most common single metric that drives firms is as humble as the number of customer complaints.
Interesting. No, I
How
like
many
that.
risk managers really care about customer complaints? I do. Because customer complaints lead to lost customers, lost revenues, legal issues, morale issues, employee turnover. You keep doing that all the way. You've touched every risk in your taxonomy. Have I answered your question? I've forgotten what the
No,
question
no,
was.
absolutely, absolutely. I think you've answered it and answered it well. And in fact, now you've also kind of got me excited for a subsequent question in that regard, because
Tell
I
me.
think what I was trying to get to, Jay, was like, you were talking about simplification, and I think you made it even more specific through your story to say simplify it down as much as to having that one focus area or one thing, one metric, because then all the other derived metrics or the overall risk management kind of would flow from there and would, in some sense get streamlined. You try to focus on too many things, I mean, nothing will get done because you'll be very distracted. You'll be trying to sort of optimizing for many of these matrices, if you may, or many of these sort of measures all at once. Now, the question though is, and this is something perhaps you may have done in your workshops, both as a student, as an instructor, as an advisor, as a leader. Is there an easy sort of cheat sheet to finding that one or two metric for a company? So let's say if, I'm not as sophisticated as a Citibank, I don't have the machinery, but I'm, let's say, a regional bank with, a more limited set of risk managers, and that's just a fictitious case I'm making
Yeah.
up here for our
Yeah.
argument's sake. Could I adopt, is there some sort of a, magic wand that you can give me that makes my life easier to get to that one question sooner? Like, is there an approach to it?
I mean, one of my other previous bosses, John Reed at Citibank, used to always say that the number one requirement to build the fastest racing car that you can think of is the best set of brakes that you can afford. So,
Okay.
so in that sense, because a lot of risk management, even today, frankly, is stuck in an
Yeah.
Excel world, while risk itself is moving at the speed of TikTok. So you can't
Well
run
said.
F1. You can't do F1 by just saying I have a good rear view mirror. That is half of the problem. So whether you are honing in on the exactly correct metrics, what do you think the doctor does? They run through 10 different metrics without even asking me what's wrong or do I feel well. They take my blood pressure, cholesterol, ECG, yada, yada, yada. What are they? They are indicators of our well-being. And you transpose that idea to your business or organization and blind without wasting time wondering about are you unwell or well, give me the top 5 indicators of well-being of your business. Number 2, there is a rigorous exercise possible to sort of extricate what are the drivers of your business with an operative requirement that they be forward-looking,
Mm-hmm.
that they be actionable,
Right.
that they be objective rather than subjective, i.e., measurable, right?
Right.
Once you put down some of these conditions, it is not easy to meet, but it gets the organization an integrated perspective on risk management, on risk. I keep emphasizing the word integrated. What is the sort of prognosis or the diagnosis that you arrive at? If you can't do that, my younger brother is head of transplant surgery at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the most specialized transplant surgeons in the world. He's also on their risk committee. And one of the things he always tells me, for you guys, it's easy, just one more check. For me, it's a life lost that shouldn't have been lost, right? It's very important, right? So the materiality of that outcome is needs to weigh on your conscience to such an extent that you say, I am going to have this radar of mine fixed to this, and I'm going to use all possible direct and circumstantial evidence to bear to inform my assessment of the risk. Is it affordable? Is it within my appetite and tolerance? Am I getting paid to take that risk? Is
Mm-hmm.
it is it usual, intended, and within unacceptable bounds? All of those decisions, right? Rather than waste time saying to somebody, yesterday I told you this on page 35 of my 500-page report.
Good
Boo.
point.
Who cares?
Yeah, good point. Good point. No, no. Well said. So in terms of integrated risk, that's actually a good segue into an area which I think is front and center today. That discipline exists on paper. And when
Yes.
I say that, I mean very specifically because yes, you might have chief risk officers, enterprise risk management workflows, professionals, almost in every organization that is large enough, right? And large enough, we could debate on what large enough implies, but anything that's established enough, large enough, bigger consequences, enough assets, enough people, will probably have that function. However, it varies very widely how
Yeah.
integrated it really is.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is, and it's nicely managed right from the top and percolating all the way down to every function. And sometimes it's kind of its own thing, right? It's sort of siloed on its own, more of a bookkeeping type of a function, and then everyone's managing their risk separately, right? Like in some sense, you are doing your IT technology risk on your own on one side, business operational credit risk is being managed by one set of folks, and then other kinds of risks similarly are also kind of distributed out, right? What makes what are the sort of you would call the essentials of building this good integrated risk management program? What are the incentives that drive that good behavior to keep it integrated, to keep it
I think
organized?
this is where people like you should speak and people like me should shut up, because really, if there is a marginal contribution that is life changing, if you will, it needs to come from taking advantage of new access, new technology to do what I would like to think of is risk sensing rather than risk aggregation, right? I
Point.
would like to think of people building a nerve center for risk, right? A dynamic environment. So the idea of integration, and not just integration, internal sort of, methodologies and so on, also taking in the external signals as they come. And to be able to dynamically, right? So once upon a time, I've seen the risk system at NASA. I've seen the risk system in a very sophisticated hospital. And even at that time, I felt that people like us in financial services were like eons behind some of what, because they all kept talking about the opportunities by being right and the cost of being wrong, and the right or wrong was not stated in P&L terms, right? I think we get a bit deluded by
Right.
looking at, so this part of what I'm arguing for here is investing in that data culture, if you like, and this AI readiness, and not just think of it as technology that is expedient.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there is a massive aspect, and I think you kind of touched upon it in a different light earlier, in this sort of conversation that we are having about behavioral economics as a case in point,
Yes.
right? Sort of playing its
Yes.
own role in risk. And this is like the other dimension of it, saying, hey, culturally, if you have a data first culture, and then, now also with AI and other modern technologies allowing us to do more, right, with less, and hyper automating some of this, I think the more critical parts is everything doesn't need to necessarily translate into the standard P&Ls, or hey, what is the cost of this loss? Yes, it's important, and yes, you may want to quantify some of those, but there needs to be a little more than that to understand what the, like, so what, if you may, using stealing your terminology,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
consequences of those risks, right? So you may identify certain risks, but so what? What can.
And don't give me this periodic health check. We are beyond that. Health checks are good, periodic are good. But we are in the age where a wearable sensor that is continuously monitoring your vitals is available. Why don't you give me that?
Good point. Good point. The continuous aspect, the ongoing aspect, the emergent aspect is perhaps more important than a static, periodic, hey, let's get the books organized and then we'll look post facto to see where we stand.
By Chuck Prince, I mentioned Chuck before. Chuck used to always say that in an organization of 300,000 people, there will be 3,000 bad guys. There'll be 300 guys who should never have been hired. And there are 3 guys who should be taken out to the courtyard and shot, right? The point is that don't just wish away. But by the way, one of the least likely guys to shoot anybody. But the point is that don't just wish away things. Don't just write a code of conduct from the top and assume that everything is hunky dory, right? It isn't. So trust but verify is part of it. But these are the things where you can deploy technology in a way that I think we do. And this is, by the way, and I know that I am probably not in the right school for saying this even to you, perhaps. I was never a fan of this whole GRC business. I mean, to me, and of course, I was being a little bit too facetious in terms of interpreting it that way. To me, the GRC was being peddled by every technology bucket shop, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because it suddenly made everybody a risk manager, just like AI has suddenly made everybody so literate in English, right? To me, the point was that this GRC meant every bucket shop could simply rig together a few things, put a couple of pie charts, put a wheel, and claim to be selling a risk management product, right? So when part of what I do in advertising RiskCounts, which is my consulting business, is to say real risk managers doing risk management, we've been there, we are there to share and empathize with you and help you through your problem.
No, no, absolutely. And in fact, I think thank you for kind of mentioning a bit about what you are doing today. And, in fact, I wholeheartedly agree with the point that you made, in fact, not opposing it at all. Because I think what has happened in our industry at large, and when I say in our industry, it's the broader industry around, governance, risk compliance, but also just risk assessments, ERM, and just the broader discipline around, audit controls and, the whole universe there, is that the creation of modern software, especially in the post-internet era, right, allowed people to quickly slap on dashboards, workflows, charts, and claim victory, right? Like
Exactly.
that's for sure. That's for sure. That has happened to us, as an industry. Similar to how you kind of, made it half jokingly, but I'm sure like that's actually very true, where everybody suddenly become a great author thanks to ChatGPT, right? So they're like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I can write this
Yeah.
prose for you. In the past, they struggled to write a
I
paragraph.
tell people at least change the style of the bullet point so I can't recognize it that easily.
Right. No, precisely, precisely. And I think in both of these analogies that you made, the outcome is just one very small, tiny, and probably not even the most consequential part of that exercise. right? So for example, and I'll go in the reverse order again, for writing, it's your thought process, it's your
Yes.
conceptualization, it's
Yes.
your abstraction, it's the way that you communicate and think about the topic is more important than the words you put out there simply in paragraphs, right? And so if
Yes.
you're a good author, it probably leads from being a good thinker, from somebody who can actually weigh things in objective manner or in creative manners and then come out with that outcome, right? And so similarly, drawing that parallel, what you are really saying and where you are stepping in also as a part of your current, sort of adventure and, exciting business that you run at RiskCounts is when you run GRC or risk assessment or enterprise risk management, the tooling is great. Yes, sure. Then you
Yes.
have lots of choices. It starts with having that discipline and having that right approach and right practice and right choices and right thought process around your risk management rather than simply slapping a tool in there and then somehow just coming up with some output that may not even represent your reality. I think that's what you're kind of alluding to. Is that fair to
I
say?
wrote an article recently on LinkedIn where I talked about artificial versus real intelligence in risk management
There you
as
go.
being somewhat, but the risk framework should be digitally intelligent. But I maintain that they should be deeply human, right? Data can alert, but only people
I
can
like this
decide.
phrase. I'm going to steal it there. They're
Yeah,
digitally
I'll give you
intelligent,
many things to steal. You'll have to pay
digitally
royalty,
intelligent, and what was
but
that?
but deeply human.
But deeply human. I like that.
Because data can alert, but only people can decide.
Oh, I even like the second line for that.
Even
Okay,
these
thank
are
you.
my election slogans. See, AI to me handles all the things. By the way, I have stories for how, in the absence of AI, I have suffered so badly 15 years ago and 5 years ago, where I could at least posit the need for the AI, but didn't have the access to it.
Let's listen to one of those stories if you want to share.
15, 17 years ago, regulators walked into my office at Citibank and said, how do your transactors know what are the laws, regulations, etc., that apply to their marginal transaction? I said, they know. They said, that's bullshit. They
Oh,
don't know, right? How do you? So I said, yeah, this and that, product programs, literature, access. And they went away and they said to me that you don't know. And we had to employ a large number of lawyers and a large number of sundry other people to
uh-huh.
effectively create a checklist of all of the laws, regulations, etc., that apply to particular jurisdictions, to parts of the organization, legal vehicles, products, processes, etc. And they said, this is so wonderful, Jaidev, but tomorrow morning, everything will change and tell us how you're going to update this.
There you go. Yep. Yeah, yeah.
Fast forward 5, 7 years from then, I'm sitting in UBS. I was global head of operational risk for UBS Investment Bank. And the state banking regulators walk into my office and they ask me the same question. How do you transact this? And I'm like, holy cow. The only thing I can swear is that I've heard this question before. Right? Fast forward to now, Shashank, because now I think others claim it too. But I did first with machine learning and more recently in the last several months with some AI capability that we partnered with, where we are now able to create a comprehensive view of the internal sort of product business, legal vehicle, organization, operating environment. We are able to create a rule book with the external regulatory legal environment. We're going to map the two. We are able to do a dynamic sort of gap analysis and change management across that construct. And voila, we are like experts in regulatory mapping and change management, and we can go and sell this to people. It took us years and years and years to do this, but so I can handle the detection, the prediction, the pattern recognition, all those wonderful things. I am still hoping or assuming that we need the humans to handle the judgment, the ethics, the escalation, the trust. So AI, somebody asked me recently, AI will replace sort of everything, and why not risk managers? And my answer was, I feel will not replace risk managers, but risk managers who use AI will replace those who don't.
Right, right. No, no, certainly, certainly. And in
Right?
fact, just chiming in here, I mean, this is
Yeah.
something, I mean, I'd love for you to also share more about risk counts and what you're doing there. But part of it, you kind of already speaking to it as you are talking about, your latest adventure. This is also, I'm very excited for us to partner, which is the path that we are down on because, we bring the best of technology, one of those sophisticated engines in the world of not only GRC, but risk management, risk quantification, all this regulatory change that you spoke about. But we are very firm believers, and that's the reason for us to even partner with risk counts and other sort of advisory companies, is primarily because we think the human in the loop, right, or the judgment part of being human. And going back to your phrase, which I don't recall exactly right now, but I remember the sentiment, and I'll
Well,
get
for
to
the
it.
right amount of check, yes.
Right, right, indeed. I think like that particular piece brought together is when you have that really perfect, or I would say really desirable outcomes, right? Because then you are mixing the best of the thought process, the best of that, the human judgment, the best of that, very deliberate way of risk managing by figuring out so what and, what really matters, right? Which is a very, again, behavioral, human, judgment centric activity. But then in order to make it real, in order to make it operational, going to the point that, stories also you just recited, well, how do you actually go through those complexities of actually implementing it? Because complexities of implementing it in the pre-AI era are difficult because somehow you'll have to take care of all these issues that you spoke about and many more,
Yes.
right? There's
Yes.
just too
Yes.
much data, and we are bounded by our own technology capacity and human capacity in the past. And so we are doing these periodic checks. Well, now we can do this automated, regular, continuous checks, but more than that, we can do a lot of things like this regulatory change management or
Yeah.
quantification of just about everything or calculations across board, right? Because we aren't necessarily doing it by hand, or we are not even doing it from a traditional, well-defined, schema-driven type of approach, but we're doing it in a little more nuanced artificial intelligence manner. But that does not take away in any way or replace the judgment aspects or the more human aspects of risk management, which I think are kind of like the other side of the coin. And you need the full coin. You need both sides
You
of it.
need you
With
need
that
the full con.
automation, you need the human aspects, right? For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I mean, boards and management will always need sort of the tech translators, if you like, and the whole idea of what I call algorithmic accountability, if you like.
I
So
like that
so there
phrase
is
too, algorithmic accountability. You're giving me a lot
okay,
of
at the
phrases
rate
to
of
catch
some
on. That's a lot for a session, I tell you.
$1,000 a phrase would make me a rich man.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, see, at the end of the day, what we are saying really is that risk is not and should not be static, right? The study of risk should not be static either. And we are long past the age of binders and dashboards and copious sort of reports. So it becomes risk in the age of AI, sort of becomes real time intelligence, which is what we have hungered for all of these years, at least people like me. It is anticipatory, it is contextual, and yet it is interpretative from the sort of the human perspective. But the ability to take risk out of being a checkbox to being a real-time radar gives me tremendous power, not to eliminate risk, but to put up the most rational risk return choices available at any point of time to an organization. I don't know if you're following me on LinkedIn. I think you are. This week, I wrote a new article on the idea of risk appetite in today's day and age. It's still a very confusing concept for a lot of people, just like how they used to confuse value at risk once upon a time. And I have had my share of laughs about people trying to interpret value at risk in their own way. Similarly, risk appetite is all over the bloody place. But to me, this whole idea of saying, can I actually almost deterministically look at my risk appetite and say, yes, satiated, not satiated, yes, earning the adequate returns, or the best possible sort of in the efficient frontier sense returns for what my capacity is for risk at any point of time. Problem, lastly, I will say this, and this is really bothers me even today. If you really look at good risk management, 98% of that is execution, that there is a 2-3% of it which is strategic. And
Uh-huh.
risk management must aspire to ensure that that strategic part of risk management does not get lost in all these noise and reports and dashboards and hundreds of things moving around. I'm like, okay, get to the point. What do I need to know? What might kill me today? But the part of converting that 300-page report once upon a time, in fact, when I went into UBS, they said to me 2 or 3 weeks from then, I was supposed to show up to the risk committee. And they said, oh, this is every alternate committee, risk committee, you get to speak. I said, like, great. Operational risk has a seat at the table. They said, you get 15 minutes. I said, okay, sounds good. And they said, well, we already prepared the draft deck since it's only 3 weeks to go. I said, great. And I get this draft PowerPoint sent to me, and it has 72 slides.
Perfect
And I
statement.
say, I have 15 minutes. He said, "Sounds-" I said, do me a small favor, convert it to one slide. The proverbial S hits the fan. They're like, what? One slide. I said, very simple. First line, big bold font. This is the amount of money that we have lost that could have been avoided.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Right? And people said, how do we establish that? I said, go figure. If I want to wake up the head of trading, the first thing I have to do is speak his language. And part of that is to say, you lost $6 million this week on stuff that, with a reasonable amount of responsibility and adult behavior, you could have avoided
Mm.
losing.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, I want to belabor this point, but I'm just saying risk at the end of the day is common sense. You can't legislate common sense, but you put all the sort of information around it and you empower the guy saying, look, in my days, I would go put a risk report in front of the business manager. The first thing he would say, without almost looking at it, he would say, your numbers are wrong. I couldn't disprove him. I would put my tail between my legs and slink back out of the room because I said, you have exceeded something. He will say, your numbers are wrong. I have no way of standing up and asserting that my numbers are right because my numbers have been put together by 18 clerks working for the last 72 hours.
Right, right, right. Indeed, indeed. No, a lot of good points again. And again, it shows with again battle scars and stories from before, right? Like how these discipline also has kind of evolved over the years. So Jaidev, what I would like to ask is, I think that again, you made so many good points here, right? From being precise about definitions to keeping it simple to keeping it more operational, actionable, so what? I like each of these constructs. As you just mentioned a little while ago, and you've already told us some about it, about this new advisory implementation business that you are working with a lot of organizations globally at RiskCounts, and like I mentioned, we're also very fortunate between Uno and RiskCounts to kind of forge this partnership, take the best of both to the world. But what's your vision for RiskCounts? Where do you want the world to remember 20 years from now? What risk counts did, right? And again, I'm going to force you here now, taking your own sort of piece method from your book. Like, what's that one thing that you would want them to remember you for?
What is a good risk management setup? It is a better business bureau, right? What we are actually hoping to enable in a client when we go is that we can add value, and that value is measured by really how much we have improved business performance. And there is, of course, in this probabilistic world, there is an ex post element to it and an ex ante element to it. But the ex ante element includes peaceful sleep, etc. And the ex post element includes the idea that among various decisions, some conflicting, I, at any point of time, am able to optimize the cost benefit risk trade off to the best possible means that I had with the best available information. I go to a lot of our clients, and some of my own colleagues sometimes say, maybe you should not talk like such an old man anymore. I really talk about the horror stories because I have a story for every particular situation, which is not good. But really say to them, look, I'm not going to impress you with I've seen it all because there's deja vu and deja vu. But what I am going to say to you is there is a way in which you can extract. I can walk into companies and say, tell me the last major incidents that you had and tell me why they are not up on your notice board.
Hmm.
Why are your biggest embarrassments not up on vivid display on your screen and shared and made into case studies? Because you are happy to talk about how the next bank took a hit, but you're not happy internally to talk about yourself. So the lessons learned, and be not bashful. But that is my contribution, I really feel, to make palpable the idea that there are these interconnected elements in managing the business, right? That your object, every consulting company that I know of creates this risk taxonomy. They put some kid out of high school across Google and he puts out a risk taxonomy. And I go to people and say, let's discuss the control taxonomy and let's discuss the cost of controls and redundancy. And let me first show you every area where you're spending $3 on a control where the risk is only $1.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
first,
Yes, of
let me
course.
start by removing your controls, right? Let me take out some of your controls.
Sure, sure,
Because
sure.
in the name of, once upon a time, the Federal Reserve Board examiners told me that if you look down upon my bank, at that time was Citibank, if you look down from the moon on Citibank, all you will see is a big mountain of policies. Because every time a problem happens, you write three more policies, keep it on top, and you somehow hope the problem goes away, right? Risk is a little bit more dynamic than that. Risk is not something you constrain to the back office. Risk is something you need to look cross-disciplinary, law, data, psychology, technology. You have to learn to work with ambiguity. Risk is not about. See, the number of companies who would rather not do anything because that is not subject to postmortem than to take a decision. And because it's a decision, it's documented. If something goes wrong,
Right.
which even at 99.97% confidence, you have that the best risk management lies in storytelling. The best, and this is not great for making it a good study if I'm going to say that all you have to do is sit around a fireplace and talk horror stories. But you have to make those lessons extractable. You have to make those lessons communicatable. So that's what I try to do. I try to go in there and say, if I codify everything that we have gone through, and that I will tell you the 5 or 6 major bottlenecks I've had in my risk management days, and why with risk counts, those are the 5 or 6 areas of highest friction that I am eliminating for you. I'm making your self-assessments meaningful, actionable. I'm making your metrics forward-looking. I am doing scenario analysis that covers all of the major high-impact events. But more than anything else, I'm going to bring it all together because white spaces are where risk comes and gets you. And therefore, I'm going to teach you what we actually mean by integrated risk management. How do you take the totality of your environment and the dynamics of that environment and give you a vivid view at any point of time of not risk, because risk has got no real value in absolute terms. Risk versus your appetite, risk versus the markets and regulations that you take it against, risk versus the returns that you're enjoying for taking that risk. If you don't put those three context elements, you're wasting your time and you are allowing people who are really stupid and should be fired to come and give you these 60-page risk reports, which mean nothing. So,
Good
lastly,
point.
I tell them that when I leave, I will not give you a PowerPoint. When I leave, I will give you the outline of a risk report, which I will help you to populate going forward. But they will be so lean and mean. I have never written a policy, I swear to you, which is more than a single digit number of pages. I don't do reports which are more than a couple of pages, or if they are more, I'll give you a 1-page executive summary. But let it come out and beat you in the face instead of lurking where somebody tomorrow will tell you, I told you so yesterday.
Good point. So highlight it, keep it simple, focus on the so what, and make it actionable, right? Make it live, make it
Yeah,
actionable.
it's simple,
Perfect.
right? All of it is very simple.
Perfect.
Risk management is very simple, however much they try to complicate. So all of this technology, even now this AI thing, oh my God, if you open LinkedIn, every bugger around the place is suddenly an AI guru, right? AI is like, oh, you do only AI. I'm like, you don't do AI, you use AI to do now what? Tell me what you do with that, and
Comes.
how is it an enabler rather than the end game? Because don't, by the way, interestingly, and this is a recent, about 6 months ago, a VC asked me to provide a presentation on AI governance itself, right? AI risk
Yeah,
management.
yeah. Very
So
hot
we're
topic.
doing some interesting work on that too. We're doing some interest work on the kind of oversight needed. I was talking to somebody recently about hallucinations, and he went completely like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We have some interesting things around that too. That's another area for us to explore,
But
right?
I'm very excited, by the way, if I may. You did ask me for this, but to the idea of Uno.ai and you and the potential partnership we can develop there, because you come at it from a perspective that really matters to me, that you understand the use cases from a viewpoint of the end user and from a viewpoint of what the delivery mechanisms are, which to me are very important because I've struggled with that in the past. I know where I want to go, I know where I am, but that path and the what is the actual mechanism of transfer to the client and what is being transferred to the client has been very elusive for me. And of course, we have not had the wherewithal to invest in the technology itself, and that's not my game. I think we have a tremendous opportunity with the partnership, and so here's looking forward to all of that.
Absolutely, yeah, the best of both. That hopefully will make our customers more successful, right? By joining forces. That's exactly the goal here. Well, we will segue now a little bit. I know this is an endless conversation about risk management with your years of experience, lots of great stories. So before we sort of wrap up, and the time to wrap up may be soon enough, but I would like to segue a little bit, touch upon a couple of things. There's always a human element to it. In fact, today's conversation was a lot about human elements and, the personalities and behavioral stuff playing a big part. And so now we're going to get to a little bit of your sort of personality and human elements. Now, you've certainly traveled a lot, right? You mentioned also about different roles that you've done. I also heard, if I heard you right in passing, you spoke about your experiences across countries in Asia, the tri-state area in New York, of course, and then multiple other
The
places.
Middle East.
The Middle East, indeed. So, like, the expanse that you've covered is quite big. What are some of your favorite places? So you live now in the tri-state area, but if you had to go out of it, right, where
With
would
no
you
doubt,
what would you pick?
Hong Kong, with no doubt. And I have a soft spot, if only because I have lived in Hong Kong in three different. So I think more than half of my career has been in Hong Kong. Before I was married as a bachelor long ago, as a trader, as a currency trader, which is where I started my career, I was 17 and a half years old. And that's a whole story about how I landed that job. But and
That's an
then later
interesting story I can see emerging on its own. Maybe we need a separate session.
on the zany antiques. If I ever became important enough for a biography, it would be interesting. At the moment, nobody would read. But then later on in my life, as a Hong Kong, I loved. And by the way, that organization that I worked for those days, I'm talking about 45 years ago, offered us $100 uptick in our base salaries if we could prove proficiency in those days Cantonese. So I went to Hong Kong University and learned Cantonese. I said, like, hey, give me my $100, which I did get.
Fantastic. That's
And as you know, now everybody speaks Mandarin, so it's almost. But with no question, when COVID hit in 2020, for personal family reasons, I have a mother in India who was in ill health. I relocated. I said, okay, I need to finally. I've been out of India for almost 35, 40 years. I said, I will go and spend some time with my mother. So in 2020, we relocated to India. We came back here last year. So for about 3.5 years. But in every one of those places, I've lived in 8 or 9 different cities in 7 different countries. It's the friends that you have that make it home or not a home. So it's very difficult to simply isolate. I don't think we've ever lived in a place that we didn't like because we had friends. Now, my range of my interests also is such that, from we are avid sort of Carnatic music fans. I am an aspiring poet. I write maybe 3 poems a week. I publish all my poems on Facebook and sometimes on Instagram. I have a reasonable readership for my poems. These are highly
but
abstract, highly
these
philosophical,
poems are in English or
all
in
English, all English.
all English. Okay.
I probably don't really know any other
Would you
language that
would you be
well.
in the mood to recite one of those poems that you
I
like?
will have to find one, but yeah, and some of them are deeply philosophical, and you may say, I have a lot of poetry, and it doesn't take much to. Well, you don't want to hear my this thing on Gaza,
Well,
but
let's say one that you would like to recite, right? Pick
yeah,
anyone, and then of course tell our listeners also where they're going to find it. If you have a link, leave it behind, and I can perhaps post it. What?
Facebook. Here's one recent one, but again, no particular choice of best. It's called Soul, a quiet conversation with my soul. We spoke not in words, but in pauses, in the hush between heartbeat and breath. I asked, did it matter? The deadlines I chased, the praise I craved, the names I learned to answer to, did any of it leave a trace on your eternal skin? You said nothing, but I felt your sigh ripple across the years. Would you have preferred not to come? I pressed to drift free of form, unscarred, unclaimed, unfelt, and I swear you almost smiled. Would you rather have lived in another vessel, another world, with less ache or more art? You looked at me then as if I had finally asked the only true question and said, I came for this. The cracked joy, the private tears, the warmth of a grandchild's hand curled around the thumb, the fury of missed chances, the silence of surrender, all of it. Even the futility, I whispered, even the longing, especially that. Then you turned away, not out of coldness, but completion. And I, left with the echo of you, stood still, finally alive.
Beautiful, beautiful, poignant. Love that. Where are all these poems? So
On
maybe share
Facebook.
some of
So
those details.
literally, here is Gaza, one quick one. Gaza shame. In Gaza tonight, the air itself has nothing left. No food, no future, no sound, but the slow collapse of breath. A child, 5, 6, holds an empty cup as if it were magic. There is no magic, not even an illusion, only dust. This is not war, it is starvation, a siege of the soul, not crossfire, but the slow burn of a world looking away. No flag owns this suffering, no argument feeds the dying. A baby does not care who started what, a mother does not care who is to blame, only that her child is fading. This is not humaneness, it is neither humanity. This is not how we were meant to live, nor let others die. The politics is ash, the righteousness is rot. All that matters now is the cry we do not answer. Wake up, world, this is nonsense. This is evil with a front row pass. Shame on us if we let this stand. Shame on silence, on delay, on a world that feeds its outrage but not its children.
Very, very emotional, very pertinent.
Some are funny, some are not so
Right.
hard
Of
and
course. That's part
dishing.
of poetry at large. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. I think this is a great way to kind of wrap up this session here. But before I let you go, right? And
By the way,
again,
I hope there's not political meaning in that poem. I hope I didn't
it's all
transgress
good.
that.
It's all
Yeah,
good. See, I
yeah.
think the way I at least personally try to put on this is we want to definitely, just, we are all busy in our professional careers, but we want to see the personal side of things. So I'm really thankful for you for sharing your personal side of things. And I think both the poems, at least in my view, were very poignant, very touching, very meaningful. And it's beautiful. I'm sure many people will enjoy, right, reading, which is why I asked, share where you write. And then,
It's on
people,
Facebook by and large because I find they're too long for Instagram typically. I tried. A lot of my friends ask for Insta.
right.
I do it on Facebook, and then a lot of family members, they have WhatsApp groups. So I'm encouraged to write. I write a lot of prose too, but it's I recently wrote a biography of my mother. She's her 90th birthday last month. So we wrote so writing English is a passion in general.
Fantastic.
I am in huge sort of admiration for good English. So it is
Fantastic.
what it is. It's fun.
Fantastic. And I'm sure the annoyance of AI generated content is perhaps playing a part in going
And
faster.
today is Thursday. You're reminded because in another hour my poker game will start. So every Thursday night is poker night.
Excellent. Well, you enjoy your poker game. But again, the very last thing before we say bye to you, for risk management professionals, for bankers, for folks who may want to just chat with you, indulge in your, sort of stories or just learn from you, where do they find you? Where are you normally?
Interesting. Yeah. I think number one, I mean, I am not there, but I will stay where I am. But the RiskCounts website, I tout as something, not the sort of the sales part of it, but I would like people to take a look at the blog section of it.
Okay.
You will see that because I feel very prolific in putting out stuff. Literally, I think every week I write an article. I put a LinkedIn post covering them more recently, but there is a lot too. Otherwise, very much available on email, jaidev.iyer at riskcounts.com, riskcounts. So I am always happy, in fact, eager to respond to people, to talk to them, to have good conversations, especially take on the challenges of sort of reconciling, if you like, the old world view of things with the trying to adapt to the new technology world of things to what I believe is common to both, which is a common sense view of risk management.
Fantastic. Great way to kind of wrap up this session. Thank you so much for spending the hour and a little more with me here. I think I thoroughly enjoyed it. Your stories are always brilliant, phenomenal. I hope everyone who gets some piece of this or all of this conversation also feels the same. And then, of course, you've left your contact information behind. They reach out to you and you engage further. So thanks again and go enjoy your poker night. And we'll speak soon again.
But thank you so much for your time, Shashank. I really appreciate it. and the way in which you have sort of talked to me. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.